All right, to talk more about it, our correspondent Jessica Taneja is joining us. Jessica, good afternoon. Now, we've told our viewers how Prime Minister and President Donald Trump have put forth on social media the strength of the Indo-US relationship. Help us understand. Now, Donald Trump is a man of surprises. This affirmation comes after he, just a few days back, he said some unworthy comments about India after the SCO summit photographs surfaced. Having said that, to what extent is this optimism and positivity, newfound optimism and positivity in the relationship, reliable and noticeworthy in the coming few days, in the future?
Well, Donald Trump's spontaneity is somehow alien to traditional diplomacy, and traditional diplomacy cannot fathom on how to sort of deliberate on all of this. But one thing is certain, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald Trump have built the momentum to an extent for the way the entire trade negotiations should move forward. And you'd recall before, just at the beginning of this year, when we saw the trade numbers of the last financial year, the trade between the two countries was approximately $131 billion, and that included India exporting $88 billion worth of goods. So these are huge numbers and have huge impact as well, not just the industry back here, but also the IT firms and the US companies that have worked with not just this particular sector, but in other areas as well. So for the trade negotiations to continue is what the primary goal at this point is between the two nations. As far as, the discussion of, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, these exchanges, the second in the last 4 days, you'd recall over the weekend as well, Donald Trump had put out his post on Truth Social, where he had indicated that, that Prime Minister Modi is a dear friend to him, and that India and the United States will continue to be important partners. And that reiteration came from the Prime Minister as well, not just on Saturday, but today as well, that India and the United States are natural partners, which seems to be the case. And the fact that, more discussions and deliberations would clear the path for certain hurdles in trade that the two have now set out to negotiate.
All right, Jessica, do we see this repositioning of President Donald Trump? To what extent will it help in the trade negotiations that will follow from here on?
Well, it's difficult to perceive and say on what kind of impact it would have on the current negotiations when it comes to trade and tariff truces, what both sides would look forward to in case the material of this conversation is to fructify, which does seem to be the case now, because the stress and the focus at this point remains on trade. That again, because India and the United States are, United States is the largest trading partner, and the fact that there's a lot at stake, not just for the Indian companies who could possibly look to diversify in the future if there are certain conditions at play, but for the American companies that have invested heavily into Indian IT firms, saying particularly, would find it very difficult to go to, say, countries like Vietnam, as well as Indonesia and other countries in the neighborhood. So it perhaps sort of gives you a signal that these trade talks should resume soon, given that the two countries were on the path of increasing their bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. That was the mission 500 that both countries were looking at or deliberating upon. So there are multiple aspects of India and United States relationship, which of course spreads to not just traditional sectors of defense and trade, but also cooperation in the energy sector as well as space. And not to forget the dependence on India for resilient supply chain in the Indo-Pacific theater, which seems to be getting complicated each day.
All right, that was about trade between the two countries, Jessica, but also what light does it throw on India, positioning of India on the global page, softening of stance by the US in the trade talks. To what extent does it show that India cannot be taken lightly? And also, you're talking of the geopolitical, challenges faced by the world at this time. To what extent does it put India in the favorable light on the global page?
Well, India is the fourth largest economy in the world, soon to become the third largest. And the fact that its economic heft has not just been noticed, but acknowledged fairly well. You've seen the investments that have come into India. Say, for example, the American investment, the foreign direct investment, it's to the tunes of $70 billion, and I'm sure it's exceeding. So in terms of trade and in terms of India's economic heft, and with its balanced diplomacy and understanding the kind of complicated geopolitical theater it is surrounded with, not giving into too much noise, and keeping its course. Especially if you recall the kind of comments and accusations that were made by Donald Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarro, and then you had the likes of Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, also give out similar indications that India needs to stop buying Russian oil, and hence it was facing a 50% tariff. So of course the kind of importance that India has on the world stage, not just limited to the Indo-Pacific theater, goes on to say that it is a partner that America needs. It is a natural partner that America would have, given the kind of governance systems and other technological advantages and the markets that India provides. Similarly, for America, its IT services would be quite difficult to onshore, despite all the efforts being made by America to make it a very protectionist economy. India somehow comes across as one of the key important players, with a huge population and skilled workers packed into one, to cater to the American demand, no matter how much it want to, increase the jobs back home. But it's a partner like India that it simply cannot ignore.
All right, Jessica, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in with those details and those insights. So that was our correspondent Jessica Taneja telling us more and evaluating for us the reaffirmation of the strength of India-US relationship put forth by both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald Trump on social media.